Hey cakers and bakers, welcome back to my kitchen. This is Emerly with my Sugar Rush, and today we're going to go over this adorable pineapple cake wearing sunglasses. So I baked two 6-inch cakes, a 5-inch cake, and a little 4-inch cake. I ended up not needing the 4-inch cake, but when you're making 3D shapes, it's always a good idea to bake extra cake just in case. And I torted all of those cake layers in half. Now those 4 6-inch layers that you've cut, those are going to get sandwiched in between the two 5-inch layers. But first we need to take the cardboard drum, and I do this with every single cake. I roll that on my table so that all of those ugly creases get flattened out and you won't see them poking through the ribbon later. I'm working with a Swiss meringue buttercream. It's my absolute favorite buttercream to work with because it's just so much more stable than American frosting or other buttercreams that you can work with, and it's so easy to make. So you want to make sure that your offset spatula is as horizontally flat as possible to make sure that everything is as even as possible on your way, working your way up. And you want to make sure that your straws are put far enough into the cake that when you start shaving away cake, you won't accidentally cut into those straws. So just cut those away, and then I have a 4-inch round cardboard round that I put in the center of my cake so that the rest of the cake is sitting on top of that, on top of the straws, and is easily supported. So I add the rest of my cake, and then of course you want a center dowel, and I don't know if you know this, you can just sharpen it with a pencil sharpener and then push your center dowel through the center of your cake. It'll go right through the cardboard round, and then take the rest of your dowel to push it the rest of the way down into the cake and into the cardboard drum at the bottom, and that will give you nice, awesome stability on your cake. When you're shaving away cake on a 3D shape, you want to make sure that you're slowly working away at it and that you don't just hack big pieces off at a time. Just be gentle with it and just carefully carve it away until you get the desired shape that you're going for. And with this pineapple shape, I'm kind of going for an egg shape. So I want it fatter on the bottom and then a little bit skinnier on top, and you want the whole thing rounded. And this is a fun little trick. I use like a cheap file folder, and I just cut little rounded rectangle shapes out of it. And this is just nice, flexible, but sturdy plastic that you can use to smooth out your buttercream on 3D carved cakes. Because those offset spatulas, they're great, but when it comes to 3D shapes, they're not that great. So you can easily smooth it out with your plastic instead. Look at that smooth out like butter. I did 2 layers of Swiss meringue buttercream so that most of the cake is not showing. You could drape this, but with how tall and skinny my cakes are, it's easier for me to panel my cake. And this is actually a mixture of fondant as well as modeling chocolate. Modeling chocolate, it's hard to paint on it because a lot of times paint will actually bead up on top of your modeling chocolate. So fondant is really good to paint, but later when we go to add extra details to our pineapple cake, we want it to blend in. So to get like the best of both worlds, I ended up using about a 50-50 mix of fondant and modeling chocolate. Okay, and then covering this in plastic wrap, this is so that when I cut into the cake and create those hexagon shapes, that I'm not accidentally pulling out those hexagon shapes. It keeps them all in place. It also gives it like a nice little rounded edge instead to all of those hexagon shapes. This is like a seashell looking tool, and this is going to be used to score my cake. So I just go along and score the entire cake. And after I've done that and I've kind of rounded out the edges and continued the lines going all the way down, I take that seashell shape again, and I'm going along the top of every hexagon shape, and I am pushing into and then down and creating a nice little pucker to each shape. So this is a mixture of yellow and orange food coloring gel, and I have watered it down quite a bit with Everclear. Everclear will just evaporate right out, but this just creates like a nice wash so that you have like a yellow orange color. And I just wiped away any of the extra with a paper towel. And then I'm taking my airbrush gun and I am airbrushing green and just outlining all of those hexagon shapes. It kind of gives your cake more depth as well. I'm going along and adding more green to the top. I also pulled the airbrush gun further away from the pineapple and pulled back on the lever more so that I have like a nice gradient. The top of the cake is more green and then it looks more yellow-orange on the bottom. And these little shapes that I'm adding, this is like a little flower cutter I had with pointed petals, and I've just cut the bottom 2 petals off and blended it into each shape. And then I just touch up all of that with a yellow, very bright yellow, so some of that yellow really pops out. And then I go along the bottom of where I blended all of those flowers in, and I just touch it up with a little bit of green so that it blends in better. So this is wafer paper. We're going to take the wafer paper, and I've just cut all of these thin shapes out of the wafer paper. And I don't know if you know this, but if you take a sharp blade to the textured side of your wafer paper, you can actually curl it like plastic ribbon. And so I use that technique quite a bit when I'm working with wafer paper. And I'm working with 2 different shades of green and yellow to color all of these leaves that are going on top of my pineapple. Airbrush color is water-based, so just be very gentle because wafer paper does dissolve if it gets wet. So you just have to be very careful to lightly add the color on so that it doesn't disintegrate on you. And I used piping gel to attach it to the top of my pineapple. I did add some fondant on top so that I can attach everything to that, fondant topper little thing I have there. And I'm a rebel. I am actually using baker's twine to attach all of those greenery, to the top of the pineapple. And then I'm just hiding that baker's twine. I know it's not edible, but those leaves are so tall and so paper thin that I needed something to keep everything in place. And then I'm just building up around it and adding to the center as well. And you just keep adding to it. I think I did like 4 sheets of wafer paper. So for the sunglasses, you can use Silpat mats. Those have a texture to them though. And then there's these semi-cakes mats. Those kind of tend to ripple a little bit when you add hot isomalt to them. So I don't like to use that. But I do have this nice thick silicone mold, also from semi-cakes. And I'm just going to use this because it's thick and won't ripple on me. And I'm just taking a cooking spray and I am adding that to the center of my cookie cutter so that later I can easily pop the isomalt out. And I'm adding airbrush color to my isomalt. Again, airbrush color is water-based, so it's really good to use in your isomalt. Do not use gel-based colors. It will break down your isomalt. So I'm just pouring that into my cookie cutter. I want these as thin as possible. And then I am just going to hit that up with my fan so that they cool pretty fast. And again, they just popped right out because I added that cooking spray. And then I touch it up with a little bit of heat, and that gets rid of any air bubbles that I have and makes them more clear. And this is an edible clear glaze, almost like an edible shellac that you can add to your isomalt, which you always should add to your isomalt actually, so that the moisture in the air doesn't break down your isomalt. And then I just use silver leafing at this point, and I added it to the back of my isomalt while it was still wet from that spray. And this is so the sunglasses look reflective. So I'm creating the sunglasses frames right now. I took the same cookie cutter that I used for the isomalt, and I am going to trace that on parchment paper. And this is going to be the outside and the inside of your sunglass frame. So the first heart shape, I outlined it. I'm folding it in half so it's perfectly symmetrical. And I'm going to cut around that heart shape about a quarter, I would say a quarter of an inch. I cut out that heart shape, and that's the outside of your sunglass frame. And then for this next heart, I'm going to cut within that sunglass frame. Or I'm going to cut inside of it. You just want to make sure that the isomalt hearts that you have sit between those two heart shapes that we cut out. Now I'm taking the larger heart, I'm tracing that again on parchment paper, and then I'm tracing the smaller heart in there as well. And I'm starting to form my sunglass frame. And I only did half of it, and then I folded it in half and traced it so that, again, this is perfectly symmetrical. And I traced it with pencil first so that I could unfold it and make sure that it looks nice and even before I finish outlining it in Sharpie. Now I have cute little frames. Nice little outline. So I rolled out my fondant that I added CMC powder to because this is going to harden it up faster. And I used Crisco on top of the fondant and then put my parchment cutout there so that it won't move, and I'm able to cut out my shape easier. And I'm just pushing on the top edge of all of it so that I can kind of bevel the edges a little bit there. Makes it nice and rounded. And then I flipped it around, and I'm just using a tiny bit of royal icing so that I can attach my isomalt to the back of my frames. And I'm just going to let that harden for a bit, but real quick I touch it up with a wet paintbrush and I just get rid of any of the extra royal icing that's squished out. And just clean up your frames. So I'm taking extra fondant that I have here and I'm adding water to it and mixing it in, and it makes it like a nice putty to work with that hardens up. It's awesome for attaching things together. And I'm just folding like thick pieces of wire together, and I'm adding the putty to it so that I can attach it to my frame. And I add that to both sides of my frame. I actually have 4 pieces of wire that will go into the cake. And I'm just adding a bit of royal icing so that the royal icing will harden and you won't actually have the floral wire touching your cake, which is not technically food safe. And then just push that into your cake. Be very gentle. I should have let this dry for several more hours, but I just wanted to get the cake done. So it did crack a little bit, but that's okay. And then I touched up the frames because I thought they were a little bit plain dull looking. So I took Sweet Sticks edible art paints and I just touched it up with pink. If you want to see how to make these fantasy hydrangeas, I do show how to make them in my Tiger King cake. So I will add a link to that at the end of this video. And now we have to add to the board. So I didn't bother cleaning the board as much because I'm just going to add to it. So I took piping gel and I spread that on the board because it will help your sand kind of stay put. And then I add my ribbon first because that kind of sticks up above the board a little bit and it will keep all your sand contained. And then this is just crushed up graham cracker. I use it for my themed cakes all the time to add sand to my cakes. And then I just kind of spread that out so that the whole board is covered in sand. So there you have it. There's my cute pineapple cake with sunglasses. I will drop a link for that, for the flowers right here. Don't forget to like my video, especially do not forget to subscribe for more delicious content coming your way. And go check out these other videos. Thanks, bye!